So, Martha, you want to tell us how you learned to become a scorer?
I decided to become an assessor when I came to one of these support meetings, and Peter, who is not here at the moment, but he got up and talked about his experience. And having gone through the process myself, I was curious to know how it all worked. And I was also, having completed the process, I was feeling a little bit of void, which you may experience as well after spending, this really intense time combing through your teaching practice. And there is such a great sense of relief when it's over, but then there's also this void of like, I kind of miss it. So I wanted to get back into it, and which is why I'm going back again this summer.
Okay, so tell us what they do to make you good at this. Convince us that you really know how to score. How do you learn to do it?
Okay, well, when I first arrived in Tulsa after having missed the plane to get there, it was a rather harrowing experience. I showed up at the scoring site with my suitcase in hand, and as soon as I got there, the first session was already going on, and they were in the middle of this intense calibration process that lasted for 2 days, and we were practicing scoring entries, discussing how we came to the scores that we did, and watching that transformation of our initial scores, our initial, how we were using the scoring guide and how we were looking at the evidence of accomplished teaching. As the 2 days progressed, I was just amazed at how truly in line we all were with one another. Going through, Sandy mentioned the bias training. We spent a full day on that. And at the end of the 2-day process, we had to take a test, I guess it was, where they had already determined the score of to assess it ourselves. And if you were outside of the window, I think it was a 0.5 window either way, then thank you very much. You may go home now. But I'm happy to say everybody that I was scoring with got to stay.
What important learning about teaching did you take away from the process?
Well, I think what happens is when you read all of the entries and you see them, one after another, you see one every 15 minutes pops up on the screen, and you read it, you realize, who has the knowledge about their subject matter and who doesn't, who can read the questions and actually answer it, and how that goes back to how they teach, what knowledge they would have that would go toward it, since I did the assessment ones. So that, it really makes you understand who understands what they're supposed to be communicating clearly to their students. It's just very evident when you do this. And I think when you do one after another, you can see the difference very clearly. I mean, you might say, well, how would I know what's a 4 or what's a 3 or a 2 or 1? There are samples up on the wall that you could see, but I think that you read them and it just pops in your head what it is. And in the beginning, when we were taught how to score, they were double scored, so that 2 people would read your your entry at a time, and then that way they would be averaged. And if one was way off, then it would go to the person who was in charge, and then they would throw out they would score it, and the one that was really out of line would be thrown out, and then those 2 would be averaged in. So that way you would always get a very professional scoring attempt. And if someone was out of line, and someone was asked to leave when I was there, their scores were, continually not in line with everybody else's.
So you scored the assessment center exercises. You want to just sort of allude to what you learned about the importance of content knowledge?
Well, the content knowledge was, some people when they were writing, they were very general about what they knew. They were not specific. They were not actually telling details that they needed to back up. You have to think of it as evidence, that when you write something and say something and then you have to back it up. And so some people just kind of slopped over that, and they didn't give evidence, and they didn't give details and weren't specific about the knowledge they were doing. Or they made big assumptions about things. You know, it was vague, or we got these words that would really explain how we thought about the entries. You know, if it was concise, if it was clear, if you really told everything you needed to know, if it was a process, how you did something, or if it was historical, social, whatever it was. And if you really answered the questions, which is a big problem that many people had, was they didn't read the questions thoroughly, and they didn't answer all the parts of the questions, and then they ran out of time, and then they jumped on. So then how would you know what their knowledge was? Because it wasn't, then it was only partial. And if it's partial, then you can't pass. If you have it all there, then you could pass. So it was more a matter of to know what someone knew, actually. You had to get all the parts in. And that was more of the problem. I think people got caught up on one part, or they didn't finish. And that's how you knew you couldn't know if they knew their subject.
Martha, Kay, you want to add anything to that?
If you have 12 pages, don't stop at 8.
Exactly.
So use the...
Use like the... Yeah.
What about entries that get too long? Did you
I
have...
want to say there's no room for fluff at all in the assessment part. You have, when you read it, the reason, like Kay said, it's so evident is that every word has meaning. Every single word. You don't have that much time. You're writing as fast as, going as fast as you possibly can. And every single word is adding more and more knowledge, whether it's knowledge of, students, or it's knowledge of the subject matter, whatever the knowledge is, it's all there. And you don't have time to do that. In fact, your best bet is to bullet your answers. Do not sit there and write in eloquent English, and fill this all up. Because
You're talking about... Keep in mind, this is the assessment.
Assessment. So, yes, it is. So, on that one, bulleting is much better because it's how much can you get down as fast as you can get down, that we can read it as fast as we can. And just like Kay was saying, for the evidence, we actually have to not just write a number down for you, we have to write down all the evidence that we find. And so if it's bulleted, we can find it faster. Then we can write it down. If it's hidden inside there, we're trained to go and find it. But it's harder. It's harder for us to find it. So make it simple and clear, and then everyone can find what you're trying to say. But don't, and on the portfolio part, every sentence has meaning. There is no space for fluff. If you actually are doing what you need to do, there is no space. Every sentence has to mean something and add to. If you go back to, it's like the rubric, if you go back to what they're asking you to talk about, and you've checked everything off that you've done, you'll see you have no space. You have to actually be cutting words out to try to get everything in.
Entries that I was reading, I can tell you what the fluff consisted of pretty much every time was, my theory of teaching, I believe that all children, that's right. Fluff. That's right. Not what. Right. That's not going to show evidence of your teaching practice and how you encourage your particular students at this particular time to learn what they need to learn. That was leave the theory out. And I also just add on to that and say that the portfolio instructions, I remember when writing my portfolios, I felt like some of the questions were repetitive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Repeat them. I mean, repeat them. Yes, because there's something about the way when you look in your scoring guide, which, like, hey, I did not look at when I did my entries, and when I went to do the assessment to work as an assessor, and I saw this note-taking guide, same thing as you were saying this, I was going, yes, that was me, and I thought, oh, I wish I had had that when I was working on my entries, and somebody said, you did, and I didn't even know it. But as you're looking for evidence of all of these things, and this comes right after your rubrics and your scoring guide, as the scorers are looking for evidence, the way that those questions are ordered, it really helps you to just plug right through. You can find the evidence if the questions are answered in order, even the ones that seem a little bit repetitive. Just go ahead and answer them again. Yes.
Okay, and why do you repetitive?
See that the way those questions are put into the entries, those prompts follow the architecture of accomplished teaching. And because that's a spiral and you're rethinking as you go through your teaching, that's why it is written that way. Took me a long time to go, duh.
Yeah.
Martha, what to do, what don't you want to do?
Okay, I have a whole list of things here, but I'm going to start with, because I was looking at a video entry, and I agonized over my video portfolios. I agonized over them because I had this idea in my head that I needed to have a professional videographer, not really, but I needed somebody who was really good with a video camera in my room, and I had to coordinate their schedule with my schedule, with what was going on at our school on a particular day, and the added level of stress of having to, thinking I had to get another person in there who was going to do this television quality video. I realized when I was an assessor that was so not necessary. Some of the best video entries I saw began with, the camera on the students, and then you see the teacher come around because the teacher has just turned on the video camera. She sits down to join, or he sits down to join the students. They have the discussion or whatever the entry's supposed to be about. The teacher disappears from the field, goes back behind the camera. You see the camera suddenly jolt over to another group, and you see the teacher come back around. And I thought, oh my gosh, why did I do that to myself? I agonized over that. And some of the video entries, the funniest one I saw was it started out completely on center, and then as the group was discussing, everybody started going to the side, and I was sitting there at the scorers are sitting at a little, you have your own little desk with your own little TV and VCR sitting there, and you're watching it. As I'm watching it, my head is tilting, and then after a few minutes, the teacher leaves the field of vision, and then the camera comes back up. But it was fabulous because, you know what, nowhere on that scoring guide was I viewing, other than can I hear it, and is it showing evidence of accomplished teaching, and does it show evidence of what this person has written about in their portfolio? Nowhere on there does it say professional quality video. That was just, I agonized over that when I was working on my entries. So that's one thing I would say to you.
Do take...
It doesn't matter if the phone rings or if there's an announcement. Or another class goes outside, outside your window really loudly. I saw all of that.
Is that okay?
But what does matter is to really follow the directions. So if it says group work, don't have the camera just on you. Whatever those directions are, follow them. Because we saw unbelievable things on the videos. And then I worked in a K-12 situation. And the other 5 librarians that were there had all worked in K-6. I was the only one that had worked in a high school. And at one point, they asked the supervisor, well, I have a question, because these kids are just sitting here. I said, what grade is it? 10th. That's what they do. So there's an interchange between the people. If we have questions, we can go and ask, and we can get feedback. Am I on the right track? Am I reading this correctly? Even beyond the double scoring, because sometimes you just come up with something you think, what? But I just have to emphasize, I agonized over the video, and I had a high school student videotape because I couldn't deal with it. And really, 8 a day, 9 a day, and I'm like, why did I ever worry about this? Because it's just make sure it has the exact thing that they ask for on the video, because that's what it asks for when we're scoring is the content of the video tightly connected, loosely connected, not connected to your writing. That's the important part.
But there has to be evidence on there, and if you're watching the video but you can't hear what they're talking about, in the particular room that I was scoring in, we had to take those entries. Let me back up for a second. When you first go from your little desk to the box where all of those sealed envelopes are, and you know that somebody's poured their heart and soul and a full year of their life into this envelope, and you take the envelope back to your seat and you sit down and you open it up. The first thing you do is you read through the whole portfolio. So you've read and you're looking for, as you're reading it, you're writing down. What is the evidence? What is the evidence? You're using the scoring guide. What is the evidence? Everything that you can find. And then after you've read through the whole thing, then you watch the video. And the video, the process is wonderful, because if there was some piece of evidence missing in the writing, which you would hope there wouldn't be, but if there was, if you see it in the video, you can add it. But the video has to support what you've written about. So you have to be able to hear it. And if you can't hear it, you have to take the video and you have to take the portfolio that you've already read, you started taking notes on it, and you have to take it to the, I don't know what her title was, she was the supervisor. There was a supervisor in every room, and you have to say, I can't score this because I can't hear the video. And to be honest, Sandy, I don't know where they took those after that. All I know is I went back to the box and I took another envelope out that someone had poured their heart and soul into for an entire year.
Yeah.
So I don't know
we
what
we don't worry about that in the video. Is it okay to quote what they say on a missing sound piece?
Yes. Yes, it is, but again, just think of your space constraints and the writing. And if you haven't done the video yet and you find that while the video is happening, if that is indeed the case, even though I know it's a little nerve-wracking when you're in front of a video camera, you might want to rephrase it, while you're sitting in the group, so then you've just got it right there on the videotape.
Across the board, a lot of times people didn't have that much information. And one was equity and diversity. 3 girls, 7 boys. I think there's more in that class. That whole question comes to, who is this group of children, and what are you doing? What are their learning needs? What are their background? The kinds of things that have helped you shape what the lesson is. And so that was one where I thought a lot of times people had given just a real brief description of the class and hadn't really gotten as involved as they could have in terms of describing the class. The other area was the goals and content. Our standards say to do this. Well, and then what? It was like there was just a very brief answer. So those were 2 areas that I think to look at in your portfolio entry. What are they really asking for? And, I know you only have 12 pages or however many pages, but again, every word counts. And one of the things when we're scoring, I think we may have mentioned it before, but I want to reiterate it, is that no matter where I found it, I wrote down the evidence. So if I found knowledge of students on sentence number 1 and the last sentence in the whole on page 12, I wrote that evidence down both times. So when I got done, if I had this much or lots and lots and lots of evidence, I could pretty much say, yeah, there was a lot of knowledge of students. It didn't matter if it was just in the very beginning or if it was all the way through or if it was scattered. So I think, it's the suggestion of putting the question and then putting the answer and putting the question and putting the answer will really help, because you're looking as much as you can to find evidence. And the thing about the scoring process is it's not about, she didn't get it right, forget it. It's more about where is it, oh my God, I hope she wrote this. I'm really looking for it if he wrote this. You want to find the evidence. Everybody there is in that credential area, and everybody there wants everyone to pass. But it's whatever the right word is. To certify. But but the thing is, you have to find the evidence. So we're just looking for the evidence. And that's why I think I go back to page 8. That was so sad because that person had lots of evidence up to that point. And then there just wasn't anything else there. So I think it's a matter of the people that are doing the scoring are looking and looking and looking. And if you follow the format where you have the question and the answer, the question and the answer, it's a lot easier to find it. But even if you don't follow that, and I'm not going to say don't worry about your spelling, but don't worry about your spelling. Don't worry about your sentence structure. Believe me, and I'm not a good speller and I saw bad spelling. We're trained not to even pay attention to that. And can I mention something about the bias training too? Is that okay? Okay. I've always worked in inner city urban schools, so my bias is toward that. And so I see these incredible suburban schools with everything under the sun. Well, they should be perfect. But, you're trained 2 days. No, it doesn't matter. You're just looking for the evidence. And then the next week, the first day, we spend a little time again. If there's questions, if something came up, if we ran across something, and we talk about our own biases, things that we kind of look for, and we make a little list, oh, I know I'm biased about that. But it could be a good bias or a bad bias. We put them all down. And then the third week, we go back again. So it's a constant, and I've heard people say, well, maybe the scores didn't understand my situation. We're really looking for the evidence. We're not looking if you guys got the most Cadillac school or the school with nothing or the school in between. We're really looking for the evidence of the teaching, the evidence of the standards, the evidence that's asked for in that portfolio entry.
Talk about your work as a scorer, and did it validate your faith in the reliability of the certification process?
Yes. Well, it absolutely did. And it, Sandy was mentioning about how there has to be a cutoff somewhere, the 274, and it's, you want, like Kay was saying, you want everyone to pass. It's not, it's definitely not like a gotcha kind of thing, like, oh yeah, we're going to really get this group of teachers. But it was so validating to see the quality of teaching that National Board Certified teachers bring to their classroom, and to see the process of how the scoring is done, the calibration process, the double scoring process. And Kay alluded to the fact that after a weekend where you had 2 days of not scoring, you go back on Monday and you go back into the calibration process, that you're starting on the same page again. I felt very confident. And the section of my own entry that didn't pass, I'm still, like you were saying, I'm feeling a little bit like, I wish I could do that again just because I want to prove that I can. Looking back on it now, I know why it didn't pass. Having gone through the scoring process, it was fair. It was a fair grade, a fair score that they gave me. Absolutely, I can see that. But yes, I 100% believe that it's a fair and equitable process.
I think it's the best possible professional development you can have. I really do. You get to see where weaknesses are and strengths are, and you get to see, it makes you think differently. And so I think the whole National Board process is one of the best professional development, and the assessment more so. Yes.